What's up, everybody? Jeremy Branch here on behalf of Be Terrible Productions, and I am joined with special guest, member of NEEK the podcast, Joshua Finney, joining us from Dallas, Texas. What's up, buddy?
Oh, not a whole lot. I'm doing great today. Ready to talk some movies.
So you saw Cloverfield last night, I take it?
I did. The original is one of my very favorites, especially the marketing campaign leading up to that. Right. I was telling my girlfriend last night, she's never seen the original, but she still went with me to go see this. That I remember seeing the trailer for the very first time in front of Michael Bay's first Transformers movie. And there wasn't even a title for the movie. It just said 1/18/08. And from that moment, I instantly had to see what this was about.
There's something to that, and J.J. Abrams kind of refers to his movies as mystery boxes, and you never know exactly what you're going to get out of his movies, and I think that's one of the things that's kind of made him compelling as a filmmaker. I am a bad geek in the fact that I've never seen an episode of Lost. Is that something that you kept up with?
I got into Lost with the second season and watched every single episode faithfully until the finale ruined it for me.
The very end of the series ruined it for you?
Yeah, most of the sixth season was pretty bad, but I stuck with it. And then the final episode just jumped the shark for me. It completely not completely, but it pretty much went against everything the series had been doing. And made me hate Damon Lindelof for quite a long time.
Right.
So, But J.J. Abrams, going back to the mystery box, he's definitely he's perfected that. And the proteges that learned under him, Matt Reeves and Drew Goddard from the first Cloverfield, and now Dan Trachtenberg on this one, are also starting to learn how to manipulate that in their favor. Dan Trachtenberg, he's never done a feature-length film. This is actually his debut. He's best known for a really cool short film based off the video game Portal.
Right. And I haven't seen that, but he's also famous as a podcaster, from what I understand.
Yes. I've never listened to his podcast, but he's definitely very well known out there for it.
For sure. Yeah, I haven't either. So we are going to get probably pretty heavily into spoilers. I'll just go ahead and warn you guys. Probably you are watching this video because you're curious about it. The first Cloverfield, what did you take away from that? First off, the movie, and then the viral marketing campaign.
The original, I took from it, it was the Godzilla movie I'd always wanted. In fact, until the movie came out, I actually thought it could be a Godzilla film. That was my theory.
I agree with you.
With the monsters roar. That's what I was thinking. And imagine when it was something else entirely. Seeing Clover, the monster, for the very first time was so awe-inspiring because you don't even see it fully until there's about 15 minutes left in the film. But then we look at some of the people who were in that film, and they've gone on to just blow up. Mm-hmm. That was one of T.J. Miller's first breakout roles. Now on Silicon Valley and in Deadpool. Lizzie Kaplan from Masters of Sex, and Theo Rossi is in it for just a few seconds in a very minor role. Went on to be Juice on Sons of Anarchy for 6-7 seasons.
Right.
These incredible actors that were seen in it for the very first time. There was no script. And behind the Blair Witch Project, it's probably the best found footage film ever made. Yeah. Especially for its budget.
I think you hit the two on the head. The comparison that I always make is Cloverfield is where Blair Witch Project and Godzilla mesh. It's exactly
it's the love child of
two.
Them.
Right. And it was a really fresh concept because we had seen variations on the found footage film at this time, but to take it to such a massive scale and to give us a VFX heavy movie and it still be found footage was very against the conventional norm of what you expect to see in those movies.
Right.
The viral marketing campaign, I mean, again, this was almost 8 years ago, so I'm a little hazy on the details, but I remember there was a company called Slusho.
Slusho is the most famous thing that came out of it. I didn't get into the viral marketing until really close to the movie coming out, so I regret never being able to have gotten a Slusho hoodie, which was one of the products you could get if you got really invested into the viral stuff. I've been trying to track one down on Amazon or eBay. They did another one. It was for a Japanese corporation. The site was all in Japanese, but it was speculated that tied into the origin of the monster. They did a tie-in manga series that showed the origin of Clover.
Oh, I've never seen that.
it was a really, really wacky few months there before and after the film. The manga didn't come out until like 6 or 7 months after it because they wanted to explain the origins of the monster. And it's like,
so was it
I personally have never read it.
Oh, okay. That's what I was going to ask. Because to me, I took it as being a sub-oceanic creature, like a deep water dwelling monster. But then is it alien?
The problem I had with the manga was at the very end of the first Cloverfield, if you watch really closely when Rob, the main protagonist, and Beth, they pan the camera out to the bay right off Coney Island, you see something crash into the water. And I always took that, like from the first time I saw it, I remember seeing it in the movie theater and gasping and having to explain it to everyone. To me, that's the monster's origin. That's the monster coming down from space.
Right. Okay. See, and I fell in that camp. That's what I want to subscribe to. That's what I want to believe. But then there was the thing that kind of contradicts it is that the kind of Cloverfield tie-in, there's a couple throughout 10 Cloverfield Lane. They're all very subtle, but one of the ones that I picked up on, and maybe you can help me decipher the meaning of it, is when John Goodman's character says that he used to work for that satellite company, because I do remember there being implications that wasn't a spaceship, but rather it was a falling satellite that caused the disturbance underwater that woke up the creature.
That's what it was always said, that it was that's a satellite that we see fall. And I've still, I don't know how much I subscribe to that, because as we see John Goodman's character, I guess now we're kind of shifting into 10 Cloverfield Lane territory. He's a survivalist. He's ex-military. He's very paranoid. I took that to mean that, that was a government cover-up saying that was a satellite. They don't want to admit that an alien just fell to Earth.
Okay.
But at the same time, something I kind of want to make clear right here that I have an opinion on is that these movies do not exist in the same universe. I don't think they do, because otherwise the events of New York City would have been referenced.
That's what I was going to ask you, is chronologically, I mean, could they have been happening simultaneously?
No, for one reason and one reason only. Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character, Michelle, has an iPhone in this movie. In the first Cloverfield, they're all using flip phones. She very distinctly has technology that is like 2014, 2015-ish.
So then it is essentially exactly real time, the amount of time that it's been since the original movie.
Yes, if they were to exist in the same universe. And I don't think... Until we see more, I don't think they do. And even Dan Trachtenberg, he did a Reddit AMA 3 or 4 days ago, I guess.
We'll post a link for that. I hadn't seen it yet. I'll check it out.
I went and read that, and I read it last night after I saw the movie, and it's really fascinating. Him and J.J. Abrams have both described the Cloverfield series as like a Twilight Zone style anthology. Okay. That they're all connected through a certain tissue and structure, but they're going to be radically different stories.
So we're talking more like an anthology film, like how the ABCs of Death, from one to the next, they don't have anything to do with each other, but they're all under the larger blanket, right?
Right. They're all underneath the Cloverfield name. Personally, I think that they could exist in the same universe. The only problem is, why not just make a Cloverfield 2 then? Because at the very end of the first Cloverfield, you can hear the radio transmission from the military saying it's not dead yet. Yeah. And that stuck with me for so many years. I've clamored for a sequel. This is not a sequel at all. This is biologically related, but it's totally different. And I think in a lot of ways surpasses the original.
See, this is where it gets to the interesting part of the conversation and why I wanted to talk to you. It's a kind of a divisive movie. I think if you love Cloverfield, like it's one of your most revered, favorite, beloved series of all time, and you go in and you watch 10 Cloverfield Lane, you will probably be disappointed.
Right. And that's something that they have made very clear over the last 2 months, that this is not anything like the first one. That's where the Twilight Zone anthology analogy started coming from. Like I said at the top of the cast, my girlfriend has never seen the original. She just knows it's found footage. It's a monster film. She comes into this, she's like, there's no shaky cam. And I was like, no, there's not. They very distinctly filmed it on tripods. Almost all of it takes place on the same set. but that it was so much more tense than the first one. I think people who did not like the first one will fall in love with this.
I agree. That's the flip side of the coin, is if you're not invested sentimentally in the series, I think this is in a lot of ways a superior movie.
Yes, absolutely. And we'll get to why we think that in a minute.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how far past the viral marketing campaign you made it, Josh, but I don't know if you're familiar with a script for a movie called The Cellar.
Yes, okay. Very familiar with it. Announced about 2 years ago.
Okay.
From Bad Robot, not even from Bad Robot, it was Paramount's Insight division, which was going to be shut down. This was scheduled to be the final film. But Bad Robot came on to do it. So, of course, they became super secretive about it. Word came out. They'd only done 2 or 3 leads. And then J.J. post-production retooled it into a Cloverfield movie, which is why I think it has such a fascinating part now in this saga.
Yeah, right. That's it. It is still very interesting. In a way, I kind of felt like, superficially, I felt like they took the name Cloverfield and put it onto a script that they felt that was a really strong piece. And then they tagged on, to me, that extra, the after she escapes the cellar, for me, it totally, probably comparable to the season finale of Lost to you. It killed the vibe for me, unfortunately.
I wouldn't say it killed the vibe for me. It definitely was polarizing. The film was so strong on its own up until that point, but of course, we need that connective tissue. I don't think that was handled badly. I thought that was a really cool sequence. It just, when you stack it up against the rest of the movie, it's like, oh, you can definitely tell where they decided to go and do a reshoot and make this into a Cloverfield film.
Yeah.
Which personally, I'm not going to say anything about the third act of the film. That's something that I think anybody either who loves Cloverfield or is seeing this just out of curiosity because of the rave reviews it's getting needs to go in and be completely surprised by.
Right. I think that's kind of the strength of his promotional material for specifically Cloverfield and also Super 8 is just by keeping it super ambiguous. Our imaginations are their most powerful marketing tool in some ways.
Well, yeah. They've even said that when it comes to their movies, J.J. Abrams says, he likes fans to draw their own conclusions when it's a mystery box style thing. Cloverfield and Super 8 and then 10 Cloverfield Lane. I wouldn't be shocked to see Super 8 retconned into the Cloverfield universe at some point.
See,
I always felt like it was going to be the sequel to it.
Yep. I had a discussion with my friend Jimmy last night, and he was trying to convince me that they were connected in some way. And I was like, it's the same concept artist. It's definitely the same guy that designed the monster for both of the movies. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they were connected. But your theory is still very viable that they could go back and retcon it and tie the two together, because we're starting to see it's all extraterrestrial in origin. There's a way that they could all be maybe in Pacific Rim, how they're engineering weapons to send over.
Right. And I think it's a very fascinating concept. We see it taken to a new level in Cloverfield Lane. There's one last piece of tissue that John Goodman's character specifically says, and John Gallagher Jr. also says it, that, he talks about extraterrestrials, that's them. They're up above the surface, they're doing patrols now. And then John Gallagher Jr. says, oh, if you think that's great, you should hear his theory about, intergalactic space worms. And things like that made me start thinking okay, maybe these could be connected.
Good point.
Maybe it's, when I started thinking about it more and more today, it's okay, maybe they're saying it's Twilight Zone, but people still remember New York. I don't think there's any way, if you do a third one, especially, that you ignore the first one.
Right.
You have to bring it full circle. We need to see Clover again, things like that.
Agreed.
But getting into some of the John Goodman, amazing doesn't even begin to describe it. I would argue this is in Goodman's top 3 roles ever.
Yeah. Because it's such a claustrophobic 3-actor story, it's so tight and constrained. Like the tension throughout it is so palpable, and he's just massive compared to those other two. And you can feel his physical presence through the entire movie. And I thought, like, yeah, he was amazing. She was great.
You know, John Gallagher Jr. was the surprise of the movie for me, though. Just judging from the previews, I knew he wasn't going to have a huge role in it. But he is very much the comic relief through all the tension. You know, oh, well, what would you do if the world was like, oh, I'd get like 50 tattoos. I'd get it, YOLO. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
Things like that. He's very much the wisecrack. He's the cut up. He's us in that situation, I think.
The HUD of this movie, even, if you will.
Yeah, he's HUD. Right. He's very much the HUD of this movie. But he's the viewer, I think, in a lot of ways. During the conflict between Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character and John Goodman's Howard, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. I know we're still like 11 months out for Goodman to be an Oscar consideration for this.
That's a bold prediction.
It's a very bold prediction. That is my bold prediction for the coming year, is that John Goodman will be at least on the short list.
Genre
he might
films
not
never get any
secure a
love.
Nomination.
Yeah.
Oh, what was that?
I said genre films never get any love. Like, look at Ex Machina at the 2015 Oscars, you know? I felt like that was an amazing
Machina is
movie.
one of my favorites from last year, and got completely overlooked, except its surprise win in visuals.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel that this could be in the running for some serious stuff. It's doing better than the original did in terms of reviews, which the original did pretty good in reviews too. Roger Ebert famously gave it was 3.5 or 4 stars.
Oh wow.
He praised it, loved it. Peter Travers was the same way. Travers, of course, reviewing this one since Mr. Ebert has passed on. And when I read Peter Travers's review a couple hours before going into the movies yesterday, I was like, okay, I'm sold on this already. He gave it 3.5 stars. Normally he hates genre films. And he was like, no, you owe it to yourself. If you want the most suspenseful movie that will be made all year, go see this.
It's so crazy to have such a divided opinion on this movie. Like, I loved it and resented it at the same time. I can't explain it, man. Like, I know part of me, like, I liked the movie better all the way until the end, but now it's like kind of a toss-up because Cloverfield wasn't as good at any one time throughout the movie, but the whole thing was pretty satisfying.
But we were making fun of all the trailers. I actually started dozing off. And it's about 3 minutes into the movie, you'll understand why I suddenly woke up.
Yeah.
It's some of the most expert use of sound I've encountered in quite a long time. The writing is phenomenal. It was actually polished by the Whiplash writer and director Damien Chazelle, doing a little bit more digging. In fact, he was supposed to direct this. The only reason he didn't was because Whiplash got funded all of a sudden. Another $5 million movie. And so he went off to go do that, of course, nominated for Academy Award for Best Picture and everything else. That guy's having a breakout season. I think Dan Trachtenberg could very well follow that same path that Matt Reeves and Drew Goddard have gone on to do. Goddard, of course, is doing Daredevil, or did the first season of Daredevil and The Martian with Ridley Scott. Then Matt Reeves is, of course, handling Planet of the Apes right now.
That's what I was going to ask, what he was slated to do. He's doing the follow-up to that?
Yes.
Nice.
He's been confirmed to do the third one in that trilogy. But just so crazy to see all these people connected to this little... It wasn't an indie film purely because of the special effects budget, but it felt like an indie film.
Very much.
That's the best way I can describe Cloverfield. It's indie without being indie. And I think it proved that Bad Robot could do an original film without it having to be a sequel or a franchise movie. So, of course, they were contracted to do Star Trek at that point. It was in production, and they had already done Mission Impossible 3. They'd mainly done TV stuff. It showed they could take an original idea and put it on screen. Now I really want to see. They have 2 or 3 other mystery projects in the works that they're not telling anybody what they are, who's in them, who's even directing them. And I'm like, oh man, please connect these.
Yeah, right.
Like I want more. If they're of the quality that 10 Cloverfield Lane was, I will see it no matter what you call it. Like Bad Robot, I already liked a lot. I was already a fanboy. After this movie, I will see anything that studio puts out. It could be a romantic comedy with Jennifer Aniston, and I would go see it.
Did you like Super 8?
I like Super 8. It's just, upon looking back on it, it's impossible not to compare it with Cloverfield. Just because they're both monster movies, but they're both radically different. There's a lot of tension throughout that also. So I kind of feel like we've gone on an evolution. You know, that's the in-between of Cloverfield and 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Right.
And in some ways it was better than Cloverfield. In other ways, it was a lot weaker. But there were a lot of jump scares in that too, and it wasn't even necessarily the monster.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just like in here, I mean, literally any time that Goodman like slams his hand down, you're jumping.
Yeah.
I jumped more in this and I'm not a horror fan, so I jump at everything.
Right.
I think I jumped more in this than the last 3 or 4 horror films I've seen combined.
That's pretty high praise. I compared it to the movie Black Snake Moan. Have you seen that?
Yes, Samuel L. Jackson. Yes,
with the Twilight Zone spin on it at the end, and I mean, I think it's kind of similar, like in that you can, without getting too heavily into spoilers, you can see the motivations of John Goodman's character for better and worse simultaneously, even at certain times in the movie.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting, the way that they played his character and the ambiguity that they left by not exactly resolving that narrative thread in a way that you don't know what happened before exactly.
Again, it's just another wonderful product of the mystery box. You're left to your own devices.
Yeah.
Because even when Chelsea and I came out of it last night, we were saying we both had different opinions on that. You know, did he or did he not do certain things that are alluded to by John Gallagher Jr. throughout it? It's just, that's part of what makes it such a great flick.
It really is
that you have to draw your own conclusions, and then you have to figure out a way to kind of back up that assertion. They challenge you to think, even in this little piece that you don't think you're going to be thinking in.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've all been cerebral in that way, because if they get people to have conversations and to talk about movies in that way, then it's a really cool thing. There's not too many filmmakers like J.J. Abrams, like you had mentioned, that are able to do original properties that aren't based on TV shows, comic books, video games, some sort of pre-existing IP. But now that he's done Cloverfield, I think was almost the one that put him on the map on the path to this Star Wars. And like you were talking about the evolution of those mystery box movies, we've kind of seen the evolution of J.J. Abrams from being like television director all the way now to like he rules the freaking galaxy.
Well, and it's crazy because, we so commonly say Cloverfield is a J.J. Abrams movie, but we forget that he was just a producer on it.
Right.
He just greenlighted it. Like that was all Matt Reeves and Drew Goddard. Goddard wrote it, and Reeves wrote it with them, and then Reeves went on to go direct it. That was his audition, essentially, for Hollywood. Same with Goddard writing the script. Like that was one of his first breakout roles, was writing Cloverfield. He had already done a lot of work on Lost. That's how JJ knew him. Seeing the evolution of the filmmaker is something that's so crazy about this. I mean, we've seen JJ kind of step up from being the producer to directing his own ideas, doing Super 8. And then he made the jump from Super 8, obviously, all the way to Star Trek and Star Wars. Whether they do another Cloverfield or not, I think it's almost absurd to think they won't do another one now. It took us 8 years to get this one, and they had to find a script and say, oh, well, we'll just slap the name on there. We'll throw some subtle tie-ins, and the whole third act will be rewritten. But it's not crazy to think some of these other low budget movies they have in production could be related to this. I would love that. I want more stories like this. They're just real subtly in there, but you'll always have to make them so tense. One could be like lighthearted, and then, oh, look at that.
Right.
That just happened. There were about 8 or 9 different times I expected the movie to take a different turn than what it did.
Yeah.
And then the fact it never did that, it just like, it's so much tension is in it. Every time you hear something drop, you're like, oh, it's going down. It's about to happen.
Yep.
And then it doesn't.
Blast, you know? Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, now we're in for the real ride. And you don't even know like what you're in for. You know, you think you're getting on this ride. And then by the time you get off, you're in a totally different part of Disney World.
I saw this almost 24 hours ago, and I still don't know how to process some of it. That's just like really what we're going to keep coming back to is just the performances are riveting. They're polarizing. The writing is good, but I think really this movie is less about the writing, and it's because had you not had these three leads, it would not have been as good.
No,
hands down, this is an example of absolutely perfect casting and masterful directing by a first-time director.
Yeah.
$5 million was the whole budget for this. The marketing cost more than this movie did.
Right. I come off sounding like a hater, but I really enjoyed the movie. After I walked out of it, I had some mixed feelings about the way that it ended. I seem to be standing alone on an island as far as that goes. Most of the people that I've talked to have really fucking loved the entire movie. Yet when I walked out of the screening last night, there was a couple behind me that were like, oh, we just wasted $20 or whatever, you know, as they were leaving. So how did the audience respond to it in your area?
My audience, as soon as the credit rolled, that's one of the only times I've ever been in a theater where it was completely silent. I don't think anybody really knew how to react. We went and saw it in IMAX last night.
Nice.
Which, I mean, it's not one of those movies that's going to make it or break it in IMAX. It wasn't filmed on IMAX, but it does make that last 15, 20 minutes even more suspenseful.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, that's really cool to see on the big screen. Most of the chatter that I heard going out of it, people were like, okay, that was really cool. Like, if you're paying $15 to see this in IMAX, you're a diehard fan of Cloverfield.
On Thursday night, especially, yep.
Right. I saw the original in IMAX. I saw it first, you know, in a regular theater, and then I went and saw it again. All my friends hated me for dragging them to the original. I was a sophomore in high school. They all hated me. Some of them still hate me to this day. There's a few of them who have never gone to another movie with me because I picked that.
Because of the shaky cam or some shit?
They were the ones who got motion sickness. The camera was just on that big of a screen. Shaking was too much for them.
Sure.
Whereas one of my very best friends is like, oh, I hate you so much. You got to go see this. Like, how is it? I hear it's totally different. Like, it's different, but it's some of the same at the same time. Mm-hmm. That was part of what made the first one so cool, was the characters were so believable. Yeah. And these characters are at the same time very believable. Mm-hmm. But there are insane people like Howard out in the world. There are people who get abducted like Michelle in the real world and held in these prisons. I just saw Room a few weeks ago, so that particular beginning was very difficult for me to watch. Mm-hmm. First interactions with her and Howard were extremely difficult to watch. And even Chelsea looked away at sometimes. It was just because he was more menacing than anything they could have put in. He was more of a monster than, you know, the original Clover monster.
No doubt about it.
Which is why I love the tagline for this movie, is that monsters come in many different forms.
Yep, definitely. So how do you rate movies, Josh?
I tend to go on a B, and C scale. Okay. So I assume you're asking me for my rating now. I would probably go with an A- on this one. I'm still a little shaky on I didn't outright hate the third act, but had it not taken the turn it did, one, I don't think I would have liked the movie as much, but two, I think it would have been better in some ways. I don't know. I love it because it's such an homage to what we've come to expect from Bad Robot. Yeah. But it was really polarizing. It felt like I was watching two different films. Mm-hmm. It felt like that would have been just better teased and then saved for a full-on third installment of the franchise. So a solid A-. I mean, definitely features some of the best performances I've seen in a long time. Again, this is very much an indie film. It's a $5 million budget. It's not a whole lot. If you don't know much about movie making, that's not anything to work with. No. That's like less than nothing in that industry. But again, some of the very best films can be made on that.
You can't even get a Jennifer Lawrence for $5 million.
No, it's $5 million is like a fraction of the budget that Star Wars used to hire John Williams, probably.
Right.
That is a fifth of what they paid Harrison Ford to be in The Force Awakens. No joke. That is an actual comparison. $5 million is a fifth of what that man was paid. $25 million to return.
Yeah, that's perspective. Holy crap. Yeah, I can't really do anything except echo a lot of your sentiments, man. It was a really strong character, like a suspense thriller. I still don't exactly know how to process the very last 15 minutes of it. I think maybe it could have stopped at about 3 points before that and teased me a little bit more and shown me even a little bit less and been a little bit more ambiguous. And I think I would have been maybe happier with that. But as it sits, I think I'm right there. Like I'll say a B plus just to be the negative one. So, yeah, I mean,
it's not a negative, though. I mean, we're appreciating good filmmaking here. There really aren't a lot of negatives to this. It's just we don't want to heap too much praise on it because of what it is. But at the same time, it's a very tense film. It's a character drama when it comes down to it. It's about these three individuals, arguably about two individuals with John Gallagher Jr. as kind of the spectator to this, watching the struggle between the maniacal Howard and the heroine in Michelle. It's a very personal tale. You get attached to these characters after it's only an hour and a half, maybe 45 minutes long. You get attached to these characters.
Absolutely. And this was a very great heroine. Like we don't always get good ones in movies. And JJ came strong with Rey in The Force Awakens, obviously, but this also is a very strong female character. She's not your typical horror damsel in distress. She's very much a problem solver. She's very much on the ball. She's always thinking, ever since the very beginning of the movie, you know?
Well, which is in stark contrast to the original Cloverfield, where, no offense to the three females in that movie, but, you know, Lizzie Kaplan gets blown up. And she's pretty much helpless the whole film. Lily she's in disarray after watching Mike Vogel get smacked off the Brooklyn Bridge. And then Beth is the damsel in distress, trapped in the sideways apartment building.
Yeah.
So it was really cool to see that. And that's another theme I really feel like the studio has carried on, starting with Super 8, when you had Elle Fanning as one of the young heroes in that film, alongside Joel Courtney, I think it was. But just so good. It's a great theme. I love seeing that this studio in particular is one of the ones leading the way for strong female roles, original female roles. And of course, then there was Kate in Lost. Evangeline Lilly for 6 seasons was arguably the MVP of that show. Very, very good. But they're all damaged in a way also. And of course, we can't leave out the Bradley Cooper voice cameo at the very beginning. It's really cool. I only picked up on it on his last line. His accent came out in it. He's masking it the whole time, and then it just kind of slides in there. And you're like, okay, that was awesome. How did you do that?
I didn't realize that he was in it. What part is it?
He is Michelle's fiance at the very beginning, talking to her on the phone.
Oh, no doubt. That's crazy.
That is him. It's actually listed in the credits. He is one of 4 credited actors in this whole movie.
Holy crap. That was $4 million right there. Get Bradley.
I had to go do a little bit of digging, and he apparently talked to JJ while The Force Awakens was going on. He's like, "Hey, we've got a little minor role we need filled. Would you do it?"
Very cool. And everybody like Daniel Craig's a stormtrooper in Star Wars. So JJ he's all about putting these like Easter egg stuff for fans to salivate over. Where can we find you on social media?
You guys can find me on social media on Twitter at Josh_Finn, Finn. And you can also find me on NEEK the podcast. I'm one of the 4 hosts of what has been described by one of our latest guests as a festering pit of lunacy. We cover all things in the nerd world, comics, video games, and especially a lot of movies and television. And I also do a second show with the NEEK guys that myself and my co-host Ray do, where we talk all comic books. NEEK the Poll List. So check us out. Give us a listen. We're on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher.
Very cool, man. Well, I appreciate you taking a minute to hang out and talk movies with me. It's always fun.
Absolutely. I love talking movies. That's one of my favorite things to do. I do a little blog myself. So it's very, very fun to get to talk with somebody else who's as enthusiastic about it as me.
Most definitely. I'm here anytime, so we should do this again for sure.